Good morning, everybody. I hope you've had a good first week back at work this week. Probably most of you been getting to swing of the new year. And yesterday I talked a little bit about my history and how I started and moved my career change eventually from advertising and into branding and what I do today. And it struck me that when I first started in advertising, one of the big marketing mantras at the time was whenever you're selling a product, tell your consumers, your target audience, what the product is and do it in an amusing way. Probably very good advice at the time, but in the 21st century, that simply doesn't work and wouldn't work indeed if people tried to follow that approach. Today, there's just so much competition in every single product category, so many new brands coming to market, so many brands competing for share of consumers that if it's just a case of telling people what the brand was and then trying to do it in an engaging way, it just wouldn't work. Analogy I often use is it's a bit like going to a party. If you go along to a party and you go into a room where you don't know anybody and you're thinking, crikey, this is a bit overwhelming, isn't it? Look at all these people here, I don't know any of them. If you don't take the opportunity to speak to somebody yourself, then you may have a really boring evening. You have to approach somebody and say, hello, I'm Eddie, or whatever my name is, and maybe start a conversation with them. And brands are exactly the same. Brands have to approach people and have a conversation with them. Of course, they can't physically speak to you, but what they can do is they can exude certain qualities that make you interested in them and start this very, very peculiar pattern of brain behaviour that's still not fully understood, which is about how brands work in our heads and create a relationship in our heads and our minds with brands that perhaps we haven't considered before. So in amongst all this noise that's going on, all these brands talking to us all the time, how on earth do you do that? How on earth do you get a brand that can say hello and stand out and be relevant? The thing that I think is so important in this is unless you're a Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Mars, whoever it might be, Johnson & Johnson, you're not a macro audience brand. And by that I mean you're not trying to appeal to everybody with products that everybody buys. You probably haven't got a product that's totally ubiquitous and gets bought most of the time by people being swayed by price promotions just because this week it's cheaper and it's not really indifferent to that other product, which is the way the mega brands often work. It's more likely that you've got a product that in your mind, and when you first started thinking about your brand and your product, you thought, well, this can appeal to a certain type of person. So who is that person? What do they look like? What do they do? Where do they live? What's their needs? And how can you create a relationship with those people? And by really understanding that individual, you can then identify a target audience that you're going to work on. And by understanding that target audience and what's important to them, you can then understand how you need to talk to them in the right way. And even if you've got relatively big ambitions to be a brand that is turning over 10 or 20 million, starting with that approach, small and smart to start with, really knowing who your audience is really, really key and important. So for me, it's not about saying what you are and then do it in an interesting way. It's quite the reverse. It's say something in a very, very interesting way and then tell people what you are. So I hope it's useful. More of these coming along over the next few days. Have a great weekend and look forward to speaking to you again soon. All the best.